and then we'll go ahead and we'll do this, and we'll start at layer 1, and we'll walk up the model and just do a quick review of all the layers as we discussed. So layer 1 at the physical layer, physical topologies are defined. This is where we're going to find out whether we're using Ethernet, whether we're using fiber, how we're going to connect 802.3, 802.5 for token ring. Are we connecting 100 megabit? Are we connecting gigabit? Are we connecting 10 gigabit on fiber? All that's going to be at the physical layer. Layer 2, the data link layer, remember, represents and prepares the packets that are received from the network layer to be transmitted out as frames on the network. It's where we finalize and bolt on the last pieces of the data frame. We're going to be able to see the header, the data in the middle, and the trailer on the back with the CRC and the checksums. We have 2 sublayers, the logical link sublayer, error control and correction, and the media access control, MAC address. And I promised you, by the way, that I would show you what the MAC address was, and nobody said anything to me about that. We come over here, and let's go ahead and let's take care of that MAC address real quick. When we come in here and we go to, just move this over here so you can see that. We go here, we go over to the command line. We want to find out what our MAC address is. We can find out our IP and our MAC address by typing ipconfig/all. And by the way, if you're not familiar with ipconfig for some reason, and you may not be, that's fine. We can type a / after any executable command, and we can get a help file, and we can read up quickly on what ipconfig does. And we'll notice there that ipconfig/all shows detailed information. So I'm just going to clear the screen real quick, so that way we can do that. We're going to put in /all. Going to do that. We're going to be able to get our MAC address. So let's just come back up here, and let's take a look at what it is. I'm just going to right-click and mark, and we will see our MAC address right here. Let me highlight that all the way across so you can see it. That's our physical address. MAC address is the physical address. You'll see it's made up of 6 groups of 2 characters each, letter number combination, so alphanumeric character grouping, 902B34, DC0CEB. First group of 6 characters is going to be the designation of the vendor that makes the network card. In this case, Realtek, as you can see right above it, is the vendor. So 902B34 is one of the identities that Realtek, or one of the identifier groups that Realtek has as a manufacturer. The last grouping of digits, DC0CEB in our case, is going to represent the unique identifier of this particular Realtek PCI GBE family controller adapter and its unique identity within the Realtek family. So there's only one of these adapters with this address and this identifier. There are many adapters made by Realtek of this type, but each one will have a different unique 6-character digit identifier within this vendor range. And that's what the MAC address represents. Every unique identity that is ascribed to a machine can be done so only because it doesn't exist anywhere else. When we look at an IP address, for instance, here, and we look at 192.168.1.1, which is our default gateway, which happens to also be our DHCP server, apparently, we know in theory that that machine IP should be unique. And if we have another machine with that IP, we'll have what's called an IP conflict. Now, an IP address is not quite the same thing as a MAC address, but it is still unique and uniquely identifies the machine as well as the MAC address, which uniquely identifies the machine. Difference is that a MAC address is static. It is actually burned into the card. It is programmed into the card in such a way that it should not be able to be modified, at least not easily and not readily so, unless you are the manufacturer and have tools to do so. There are hacking tools that will let you modify the MAC address, but we're not going to discuss those right now. But they are available, so in theory you could modify it. But unless you were up to no good, you wouldn't do it. Let's put it that way. Whereas the IP address may be DHCP assigned, may be dynamic. We'll come to talk about dynamic IP addresses and static IP addresses here a little bit later in our conversations in networking. But for now, let's just understand that the IP address, if it is dynamic, is going to be assigned by a system like DHCP, and it may change over time. Even though that it has to be unique, it could still be assigned to me one day, and then after my lease expires, it could change. If it's a static address, it's assigned to me, and unless somebody else changes it and reassigns it, it should not change. Those are both unique identifiers, as is the machine name and many other things that we will use. So the MAC address is going to come at the data link layer.